Hello and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordian Glory video, and before we get into today's video I would like to say a huge thank you to Henry for sending in some awesome pictures of his Mordian Iron Guard. I love a good Mordian Iron Guard army, of course I do. That's why I named the channel Mordian Glory, and I absolutely love the effort that has been put into these models. We have elements of the 451st Mordian Armoured Division, the Mordian 13th Regiment, the Mordian 813th Battalion, the Lucky Company M. There's all sorts of Mordians here, and I just love it all. So thank you for sending these pictures in, Henry. They look absolutely fantastic. If anyone else has got any cool pictures that they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them directly to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. But don't worry if you can't remember that. It'll be down in the description below along with a link to the Facebook page. But without further ado, let's get into today's video. Now today guys, what I want to do is give you some genuine, honest to God, down to earth advice on how you can do well at a Warhammer 40k tournament. Now I'm not going to talk to you about tactics or lists or anything like that. Oh, take this unit, use this faction. We're not talking about that kind of stuff. What I want to talk about is what you can do in the real world. What you can do to give yourself the best possible chance of winning a Warhammer 40k tournament. Just some real life, real world advice. Because you can turn up with the best net list in the world, but if you're not really ready for the event, then you're not going to do very well. So the first thing I want to say is, if you're going to go to an event, and bear in mind, this is if you're trying hard, not being a tryhard, but you're trying hard to do as well as you can possibly do, then there's nothing that will do more for you than having a good night's sleep. I know, sounds crazy, sounds rather obvious, but let me tell you, I cannot tell you the number of tournaments that I have turned up to just really, really tired. And that's not through sort of lack of trying to get sleep, but just because I'm often so excited for an event that I don't sleep. Even now, after all the events I've been to, I still get really excited. But if at all possible, just get as much sleep as possible. And I'm not just talking the night before. You know, if you can, just the week running up to, the 3 or 4 days before you go to the event, just make sure you're not in a terrible sleep schedule. Just make sure that you're getting a solid, minimum 6 hours, 7 hours a night. You're in a good cycle. You don't really want to be in a sleeping pattern where you're going to bed at 3 in the morning and getting up at 11 or anything like that. No, make sure you're on a solid, good sleep pattern so that when you're going to and we're talking a grand tournament here, we're talking something that isn't just a one-day bit of fun. Give yourself the best chance. Get a really good night's sleep. And it sounds obvious, but I can't tell you. Loads of people on a 2-day event, they'll go out, they'll have a decent night's sleep the first night, but at the end of the first day, they're going to go out and they're just going to get absolutely smashed, get really into the social side of things, which is great. If that's what you're there for the event, go for it. For a lot of people, turning up to a tournament is not about winning games or playing games. It's just about having an excuse to hang out with the mates and sink a few beverages. And that's absolutely fine. But if you're going there to score as well as you possibly can do, then you need to make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing, which again, it's going to sound obvious, but you'll be surprised at how easy it is to overlook, which is make sure that you are eating and drinking constantly throughout the day. Don't miss your lunch, don't miss your drinks, just make sure that you're staying hydrated with water and that you're getting your lunch. Again, I have done this so many times. In fact, I do this at every event. I don't feel hungry when I'm at an event. I'm talking like the whole time I'm playing. Obviously, in between days, that's different, but the whole time that I'm in that gaming hall, going through round after round, I just don't feel hungry. And even when I'm when leading up to the first game, when I should have had my breakfast and whatnot, I'm excited, I'm nervous, I'm ready for the battle, and I just don't feel hungry. And I cannot tell you the difference it makes. All the tournament, as recently as the last 3 or 4 events that I've been to, the ones that I've done well in. The one where I went 1-1-1 with my pure infantry guard, I had a good night's sleep, went down the night before, stayed over at a friend's house. We made sure we went and got a proper Subway when we were having the tournament. Did really, really well. You know, stayed on top of the tournament the whole time. Same with that first Science tournament that I went to, where I went 2-1. I just made sure that I was having plenty of drinks throughout the day, and that I went and got myself a proper lunch. Now, and this most recent one, where I went 3-1-1 with my Scions, again, I got down to the venue on the Friday. Tournament wasn't until the Saturday. Got down there on the Friday. Had a good night's sleep. Got settled. Had a good meal the night before. Constantly drank water throughout the event. Had my free lunch and all that kind of stuff. Did really well on both days. I can't, you know, if I hadn't eaten properly, and I wasn't hungry at any of, you know, almost throughout the whole weekend, even between rounds and between days, I wasn't hungry because I was just like, I went 2-1 on my first day. I'm doing well, kind of thing. So I forced myself to eat, even when I had no appetite. I forced myself to eat, and it made such a difference. And you know, I can attribute to that win against the Admech player. You know, you can talk about skill and all this kind of stuff. I attribute that to having a good night's sleep and a good meal. That's what I attribute that to. Sounds crazy, but you know, that's what I think it came down to. More than any other factor, I was on my game because I wasn't, you know, subconsciously, because I wasn't hungry or thirsty or anything or tired. I was able to make those good tactical decisions. Where I can't, you know, that event that I went to where I went 1-2 with my Scions and where I was really flippant, I hadn't had a good night's sleep the night before. I've been messing around with like lists and packing and all that kind of stuff. Just been messing around with it. And yeah, if I got a good night's sleep and I didn't get my lunch, I just got like a quick sandwich or something. I bet, you know, barely had like a drink that day, and I went 1-2. It's such a difference. It's such a difference. Again, I can't emphasize it enough. Make sure you sleep, you get plenty of sleep leading up to it. Make sure you are eating and drinking. Even if you don't feel hungry, even if you're just super excited, especially for your first event, make sure you're eating and staying hydrated, because you won't realize it. I don't know if this ever happens to you guys, but especially if I'm like really into like a video game, something like a Total War game or like a 4X like Stellaris, I can spend the whole day in front of my PC just gaming like 8 hours straight, just like getting up for it, and I won't realize how hungry I am until I get up to go to the toilet. It's been like 4 or 5 hours. I'm like, Jesus, I haven't actually eaten anything today. I'm just sat in my underpants, you know, just playing video games. I haven't eaten or drunk anything today. It's very, very similar when you're playing 40k at a tournament. It's very, very similar. Speaking of going to the toilet, I know it sounds a bit gross. We're talking about bodily functions, but you know, make sure that you go to the toilet frequently. There is this like, you might have this thing where like, oh, I don't want to leave the game again. What if my opponent like does something when I'm away, or I want to be able to focus and stay in the zone or something like that. Don't worry about anything about that. Okay, your opponent's not going to cheat you. Don't be paranoid. And even if he does, he's a cheating bastard. You know, he's going to do it anyway, wasn't he? But the point is, you know, he's not going to. And make sure you go to the toilet, because if you're holding it in, you're not devoting your brain power to winning the game. A portion of your brain power is going to be focused on you needing the toilet. Okay, so I know it sounds silly, like, you know, but it's just, be aware of it. Don't worry, you know, your opponent won't mind. How I often do it is I will finish my turn, and then I'll say to my opponent, look, I'm going to nip to the loo quickly. Do your command phase, your movement phase. That's absolutely fine. And I'm even like, you know, if you need to roll any advances, just do it. If you want someone to, you know, if you can, you know, let someone from the other table watch you roll the dice or whatever, or get a TO to watch you. I don't really care. You know, if you want to roll them, that's fine. But you know, just do your movement phase and your command phase while I've nipped to the toilet. And every single time, my opponents have been grateful for it, because it's given them a minute or two to just pause and go, okay, I've got a minute or two whilst my opponent goes to the toilet. He can, you know, I can have a little think, and I can, you know, blah, blah, blah. So and your opponent will reciprocate. You know, your opponent will go, oh, I need to talk now. You do your movement and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just simple things like that. It's just etiquette. It's just gamer etiquette, you know. So again, just make sure you're doing that kind of stuff. Give yourself, you know, make sure basically that you're not thinking, you know, subconsciously hungry or subconsciously thirsty or tired. You know, even though you're pushed to the back of your mind, make sure you're not tired, and make sure you're not like, you know, thinking about needing the toilet or anything like that. Just give your brain the chance to be as focused as it can be, 100% laser vision focused on tactics, winning the game, movement, precision, all that kind of stuff. Give yourself the best chance. Now, one other thing that, especially if you're going to a 2-dayer, okay, especially, is make sure you've got a chair. Okay, it's gonna sound silly, but again, it's all going to be about this excitedness and nervousness. And I just imagine like a fat kid in a candy shop. That's what I am like. I am just permanently excited when I'm playing a game or when I'm at a tournament. And it's nervous excitement, and it doesn't matter how many events I've been to. I have been to literally hundreds of tournaments in my lifetime. I've been playing competitive 40k for 10 years. And it doesn't matter. I still am nervous and excited and just all those feelings, and it doesn't matter. That's why I go. I like that feeling in a funny sort of way. I hate it at the time, but I love it at the same time. It's a bit weird. Maybe I just like hate myself and like punishing myself. But that, because of that, you're gonna be standing up, because that's what people do when they're excited. They stand up, they want to move around, they're animated, they're ready. Let's go, 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 go. Make sure that you've got a chair. Force yourself to sit down when you get the opportunity. 2 reasons. Number 1, it lets you rest your feet. Because I guarantee you, when you get to the second day, if you stood up all of day 1, you're going to have really sore feet and legs. You could take it a step further. Make sure you're wearing comfy shoes and something like I often like to wear Skechers at a tournament. Yeah, they're not the coolest shoes, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to a Warhammer event. No one's cool there, and it means my feet stay comfy. But also another important reason is if you force yourself to sit down, even if it's just for 30 seconds, we end up popping back up again with excitement, like what happens with me. Just sit down and give yourself that moment to stop the chattering monkeys going through your brain. What am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? 30 seconds, rearm, refresh the brain, and then stand back up again, and you're back into it. It just gives you that moment to think about it. Okay? And it just, again, it's all these little things, these real world things that add up to having, a good a chance as possible. It's just removing the little subroutines that your brain will be thinking about. Just getting rid of those and just letting it focus on the main program. That's what you want to try and do with it. I don't know if that's correct technical jargon, by the way. Anyone in the IT comment, IT industry, comment down below. Now, one other thing, and this is the most obvious one, but I've kind of left it to the end. Okay, all the stuff that we've talked about at this point. Some of it's been like, prep leading up to the day and all that kind of stuff. But here's a really big one. This is a really important one, which is don't go to a tournament with a list you haven't used before. Okay? Don't go to a tournament and you haven't practiced. Okay? Because you're just going to forget something. You're just going to not be able to judge stuff very well. So the reason I have been riding this Scion train so hard is because I've kind of decided I'm going to just get in reps with this list. And I often have a bad habit where I'll find something that works, I'll play a few practice games with it, and then I'll go to a tournament and it'll be okay and it'll do well-ish, but then I'm like, wow, I want to move on to the next thing. I'm like a butterfly, a leaf on the wind kind of thing. I'm just flitting to the next thing. I want to try the next cool thing. Right, I've tried pure infantry. Now let's try pure tanks. Oh, I've tried pure tanks. Now let's try pure scions. Let's try an all combat list. Just if you're going to do well at an event, the best way you can do that is, it's what the pro players call getting reps in. There's a gym analogy. Just get your reps in with your list and just smash it. And it doesn't mean you can't change your list. But what I would tend to say is, unless something is glaringly obvious, okay, when you're doing your practice games, have 2 or 3 practice games with a list before you change anything. Look at my Scion list, okay? When I first started it, I was using Valkyries, okay? And then I took those to a couple of tournaments, and they were okay, but I knew they just weren't quite working. So I ended up dropping those Valkyries out, and I had a few practice games. I had a 3-week lull between tournaments, and I had to proxy them a little bit for my practice games. A couple of Rhinos with Torx Primes, but I started using my 5 Torx Prime list, and I got an idea straight away. Yes, these Torx Primes, this is what I'm enjoying, this is what I'm liking, this is good, we're all having a good time. And then I was like, right, okay, fair enough. But these Baldwin, they're not quite doing it for me. Okay, they're not quite. I'm just not quite feeling. They're a bit inflexible. I'll try out some Crusaders, great. And I ended up having, before I went to this tournament, before I submitted my list, I had 3 practice games with with my Crusader Torx Prime, 5 Torx Prime list, the latest iteration, and I knew it worked. And by having those practice games, I got an idea of what the Crusaders could do, how much of a toolbox they were, what things that I initially thought, yeah, that fight twice thing's going to be great with the Crusaders, or the regrowing them is going to be great. That's the main thing I'm taking them. Turned out I barely ever regrew any in the tournament, and the double movement thing was actually the most clutch thing about them. Wouldn't have really identified that if I hadn't played on practice games. And it only ever takes like 2 or 3 games. But think about it: if you're doing a 5 game event, or like a 2-day, 5 or 6 game event, if you've not had any practice and it takes about 3 games to get familiar with the list, then for those first 3 games, you're basically at disadvantage because you're learning your list. You're getting a feel for, right, if I shoot this at this is how much damage I expect it to be able to do. Yeah, so you're not going to do as well. Whereas if you go into that tournament and you've played, at least 3 games with that kind of list, you know that you're going to be like, okay, I've played at least 3 games of this. I know that, I thought these Torx Primes were quite good at shredding vehicles, but actually it turns out they're not very good. They tend to bounce, and these, actually they're just really much better at just doing what they're meant to do, which is just shred, infantry, and I know that now. And so I know it sounds obvious and that's maybe not the best example, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say here. You're not having to learn what your stuff can do because you've already learnt it. And that's just the biggest thing. Like, it will also, the big thing about getting practice games and about getting reps in, and why I've literally been playing Scions non-stop for months now, is because it allows you to instinctively know what your army can do. So you don't have to think too much about it when you're playing. I know if I fire this Torx Prime into this blob of Scutari, it's going to pick up 10 or 12 of them. What was really interesting in that AdMech game, my opponent was actually surprised at how quickly I chewed through his Scutari. I wasn't surprised. I expected to chew through his, even though they were like mega durable Scutari with 5 of Invuln, I expected to chew through them that quickly. And it was a simple case of I had played 2 or 3 games, 2 in an event and 2 practice. I played 4 games against AdMech, new AdMech, of varying lists of varying competitiveness. I played 4 games against them, and if you include the Scutari that were in that night list, you could say that I've played in that second tournament. You could say 5 games. I played 5 games against the new AdMech, and in all of those games, I'd fired at some point Torx Prime, Daka Primes into Scutari. And I had just an instinct for how many I was going to pick up. I don't know if this is the exact maths hammer, okay? I've not done the maths hammer on this. I've just got the battlefield experience. And I know if I fire a Torx Prime into a block of Scutari, even if they've got their buffs up, I'm looking at probably killing about 10. I know I can kill about 10 of them. Okay, if they haven't got the buffs up, I'm going to be killing a hell of a lot more than that. But I know that a Torx Prime equipped for shredding infantry can get about 10 of them. I know that I'm going to kick them down to a 3-up save with the Gatling, because they're only ever going to be on a 2-up now with the way they've changed Lucius and whatnot. And I know that I'm going to kick them down to a 5-up save or Invuln save with the volley guns. I know that's what's going to happen. I know my rerolls and all this kind of stuff. I just know it. I've not done the math hammer on it, but I've played, like I said, 5 games, and every single one of those, Daka Primes have shot Scutari, and every single time I was able to lift up that many, or more. So I know that because I've played that experience, and I know that scenario well. I know now that I don't need to. If witches want to try and tie up my Torx Primes in combat, I actually don't care because I can just blast them off the hull. I know I can do that, even hitting on 4s. I've got that experience in a couple of games now, so I know that feeling. So yeah, I guess we'll call it there, guys. But the to summarise, get your sleep, get your food, get your drink. Make sure you've sat down, and make sure you're not hopping from one leg to the other going to the toilet. And last but not least, make sure you have got in plenty of practice games. I know sometimes it can be a little bit boring playing the same list over and over again. Hell, I'm getting a little bit sick of Scions. But I know it can feel boring playing the same list over and over again. But if you do, you'll get reps in and you'll just get familiar and you'll just do well. You'll just do well with them. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page and chucking me a few dollars. I'm super grateful for any support that I can get, and also super transparent with what I use the money for. It goes on new terrain for the battle bunker. By the way, guys, there will be more battle reports coming soon, but it goes on new terrain, it goes on new models so that I can keep my army on the cutting edge and I can take guard to tournaments and do well with them. And speaking of number one at the moment that it's being used for is going to tournaments. I am absolutely smashing. I've got 2 more tournaments coming up. I've got an RTT and I've got a GT. I've got a super major coming up in September, and all the ability for me to travel and hotels and funding and tournament tickets and all that kind of stuff is down to the very generous support of my Patreon supporters. Massive thank you to the current Patreon supporters. It is thanks to you guys that I've been able to go to tournaments, do well with guard, bring back actual facts from the front lines and not just repeat stuff from the internet. It is all down to you guys. Massive thank you. I really appreciate your ongoing support. Anyway, don't want to get too mushy about this kind of stuff. You guys know me, but thank you for watching. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.